If you are looking to move to Dubai, then this video will give you everything that you need to know so you can avoid the thousands of dollars of mistakes that a lot of people are making when going through the process. And trust me, this is not a process that you want to do wrong. There is a lot that you need to consider, all the way from leaving your current country to setting up your business and making sure you are properly set up in Dubai so you don't end up in problems later on. And this might be a slightly lengthy video, but it's just all of the boring details that prevent you from making costly mistakes. So that is why I am making this video. Before we get into the video though, as much as I want to give you as much information as possible in this video, I cannot possibly fit everything into just this one video. And the thing is that all these kinds of things are always gonna be super specific to your exact situation. So which country are you coming from? What kind of business are you setting up? What are you looking to do? What activities do you need? Essentially a lot of questions. So if you want help with this whole setup, with actually implementing all of this, and you want to discuss the exact specific details for your particular situation, we would be very happy to assist you. Now let's first talk about the cost. So how much should you expect the entire process from start to finish to cost you? Essentially, how much should you be willing to invest into your new setup in Dubai? A lot of people talk about setting up in Dubai for as little as $7,000 to $9,000. And yes, if you cut corners, that's possible, but those setups are usually one size fits all, and they often lead to problems later on, meaning frozen bank accounts, rejected visa applications, or a company structure that doesn't actually work for your business. A very common mistake, for example, is choosing the wrong business activity for the company when it is established, and this then leads to difficulties in banking and can even go so far as to be illegal and punishable by law. We are not the cheapest option out there, and to be honest, that's intentional. We position ourselves more as a premium provider because we take care of everything end to end. This means from the right exit from your home country to the company structure, to the visa process, to banking, to properties, and personal ongoing support after everything is set up. Another frequently asked question is what kind of living expenses you can expect in Dubai, just so you are aware of that in terms of how much money you should be making, in my opinion, to move to Dubai. Now this obviously doesn't have a specific answer, it's gonna depend on your personal lifestyle, but just think in terms of if you are coming from a Western country, whatever expensive Western city you can think of London, Paris, these kind of cities, it's probably gonna be similar price or even slightly cheaper. So for example, if you are coming from London, you can get a lot more in Dubai for the same amount of money. Essentially, you might even be surprised that the cost of living in Dubai is lower compared to where you are coming from if you are coming from one of these really expensive cities. So essentially, an average one-bedroom apartment is gonna be $2,000 a month, probably slightly more. It really depends where you want to live. If you are ordering food all the time, it's gonna depend on what kind of food you order, of course. You can budget at least $1,000 probably, and then everything else probably $1,000. That's if you are living sort of a regular, comfortable lifestyle and you are not going out there balling out. Of course, there is no upper limit. You can easily pay $5,000 to $10,000 or more for a large apartment in a very good location or a villa. In the end, it really depends on what you are looking for. If you want to move to Dubai purely for tax reasons, you should earn at least $10,000 net per month, and that is when moving here probably starts to make sense, because the thing is, below that amount, the things that you are losing out, for example, if we are talking about public services, are just too high, and this applies especially to people coming from Europe. Also, the tax savings that you are making aren't yet that substantial at those income levels, but once you get into that level and above that, the tax savings that you are making here are really going to add up. And with the money that you save, you are going to be able to get much more than what you are losing out in terms of the public healthcare in Europe or something like that. This is just a rough overview. There will be people saying like, no way, that is enough. What if I have 2 kids, whatever? For example, you can expect to pay between $1,000 and $1,500 per month for school for one child. Essentially, it's gonna depend. That's just a rough estimate of what you should make in Dubai at a minimum to make it worthwhile from a tax perspective and to live comfortably. Yeah, so let's say you tick those boxes, you make enough money that it makes sense for you to come here, and you have the money to essentially invest into the process of getting everything set up. So what is going to be your first step? Well, your absolute first step is actually to not think about Dubai at all. It is to look at your own country where you are coming from, because assuming that you are coming to Dubai at least partially for the tax benefit purposes, then actually the most important thing for you is to figure out how you can exit your previous country. And this is going to be the thing that I cannot possibly cover for all of your situations in this video, because this is going to be absolutely dependent on where you are coming from. If you are coming from the United Kingdom, for example, they have these series of tests you will need to pass to make yourself essentially a non-resident in the UK, and depending on how many of these tests that you pass, that will determine how many months you are still able to spend in the UK in order for you to no longer be a UK tax resident. So you want to look at the criteria for your country on how you can become a non-tax resident in that place, and make sure you are able to pass those criteria first before you even start thinking about moving to the UAE. Now this is gonna depend on your passport, it's gonna depend on where you are living, how long you have been living, where you are. So for example, we have cases from Canada where people had to pay massive exit tax bills to be essentially allowed to leave the Canadian tax system. Some of these countries are absolutely crazy, and the craziest of them all is gonna be the United States, that essentially just doesn't allow you to leave. In fact, you can physically leave, but you will still remain a US taxpayer as long as you hold a US passport, because the US has a citizenship-based taxation. So essentially laws vary from country to country. In some countries it's easier to emigrate as an entrepreneur or investor, while in others it is more difficult. And that is why it is important to have the right partner for your Dubai setup as a sparring partner who will also accompany you through this step. But most agencies offering these Dubai setups do not care at all where you come from or whether you can implement it in a legally compliant manner. They just want to sell you the setup. So if you assign someone to help you with the Dubai setup, I can only recommend hiring a partner who will also assist you with the exit step in your home country. Okay, so let's assume you have looked at the criteria of your own country and you are essentially able to meet the criteria to become a non-resident in your country, and you filled out the forms and everything to exit yourself out where you are coming from. Now let's start thinking about what is actually the first step for you to move to the UAE. Well, the way the system works here is that essentially as long as you have a way of making money here, you are going to be able to come here. They are going to have a visa that is right for you. They have different types of visas for people like you who want to come here. They have the golden visa, so there's multiple ways that you can qualify for this. If you are a professional in certain industries, you can just get a golden visa. Also, you can get it if you are buying property that is worth at least 2 million dirham, which is around 550,000 US dollars. Essentially, there are different ways, and the main advantage is that this visa is valid for 10 years, and additionally there is also an investor visa, and here you must invest at least 750,000 dirhams and are then entitled to a 2-year visa. But for most people who are moving here, the way you are probably gonna do it is that you are gonna set up a company in the UAE, and then you are going to employ yourself as a general manager. So your own company will then be the sponsor for your visa, and this visa is called an employment visa. And the second option, as a partner or shareholder in your own company, you can also apply for a partner visa, and these visa types, so both of them, are valid for 2 years. The advantage of the partner visa over the employment visa is that you only need to have been in Dubai for at least 1 day per year, and with the employment visa you must have been in Dubai for at least 1 day within a 6-month period, and that means at least twice per year, otherwise the visa expires. So technically most of our clients, for example, set up a company here and then hire themselves to get an employment or partner visa via their company. So I am assuming now that you are not qualifying for the golden visa and you are going to come here via setting up a company. And if you are doing that, then your first step obviously is going to set up the company so that you can apply for a visa via that company. And the way that is going to work is that you are gonna need to know whether you need to set up a free zone company or a mainland company. So let's simplify this a little bit. If you have an online business where you are selling your products or services outside of the UAE, so for example you are selling your online courses, your online coaching, or maybe you are running a marketing agency and serve clients predominantly outside the UAE, then a free zone company is the right choice. However, if you had, let's say, a real estate company where the business you do is with clients within the UAE, or you want to run a car rental business in Dubai, for example, then you would need to set up a mainland company. So in general, if you predominantly serve customers or clients in the UAE and you want to have employees physically working in the UAE, a mainland company is usually the right way. Probably the biggest advantage of a free zone company is that you can open the company completely remotely, and this means you don't have to be in Dubai or the UAE to open it. If you want to open a mainland company, you generally have to do so on site at the so-called DED, the Department of Economic Development, and in theory you can also open a mainland company remotely via power of attorney, but this is more expensive and also more complex. So let's assume now you need to set up a free zone company because you are an online business owner. Then you can either work with a consultant or an agency, or you can also do the whole Dubai setup yourself, meaning the company establishment, the visa and the bank account opening. And compared to other company setups worldwide, however, you can relatively quickly make like serious mistakes with a Dubai setup. So the most common hurdles are choosing the right company form, the right business activities for the license, a smoother visa process, and probably the most difficult part of the setup, opening a bank account. If you decide to go through the entire process yourself, I can only recommend that you conduct very thorough and in-depth research and plan each step carefully so that you don't end up facing high costs because mistakes were made or the process is not going forward. If you decide to choose someone to support you throughout the entire Dubai setup process, I can only recommend choosing a partner who will accompany you through all the steps and also beyond, because most providers leave you on your own after business setup, visa and banking, if banking even worked. And when it comes to real estate, accounting or even family topics such as schools, you are left completely on your own. And this is why it makes sense to have a one-stop solution that works in a legally compliant manner and provides continuous support so that you don't make any fundamental mistakes in other areas that you might regret later. And believe me, there's so many companies, especially in this business setup space, who have no idea what they are doing. So before your company's license can be issued, you are gonna have to choose the right business activities for your trade license, and some of them are regulated, in which case you would need to get extra approval from some of the government departments. When you work with a provider, the provider should give you accurate advice on choosing the right business activity. Then in the next step, you will get your trade license after around 1 week if you incorporate a free zone company, and then the establishment card. If you incorporate a mainland company, it takes around 1 to 2 days to issue the trade license and the establishment card. So the establishment card, you will need it if you want to apply for a visa under the company, and when this card is issued, you can also start with the visa process. For this process, you will need your passport copy and a biometric passport photo, and first an e-visa will be issued. And if you establish a free zone, the e-visa will be issued when you are outside the UAE. If you establish a mainland company, it will be issued while you're inside the UAE. Essentially, the e-visa is not yet your official residency visa. It's more like a temporary visa that will allow you to enter the UAE for the purposes of finishing up some things that you will need to do in person in the UAE, and in this case, the visa process. So now let's talk about the steps of this visa process happening in Dubai. There's basically 3 things that you will need to do here. The first thing you will need to do is a medical check, and we always use VIP medical centers. So they will take a blood sample and test you for certain diseases, and they also do an X-ray. Then they issue the test results and a certificate, and you can expect that the whole process takes less than 1 hour until you get your test results. And if you work with us, one of our team members will pick you up and bring you also to this medical center. If you do the process yourself, you can just search for medical center on Google Maps and you will find many options. However, with some medical centers, you will need to allow significantly more time than with a VIP medical center, and in some cases it can take until the next day for the test results to be issued. So let's assume that everything goes well with the medical check, and then the next thing you will need to do is your biometrics appointment, where you will just need to get a fingerprint done, and we do both, so the medical check and the biometrics appointment on the same day. After that, and this is a place where essentially many people make costly mistakes because they do it themselves or the provider has given incorrect information. They don't know that they can't actually leave the country until you get your residence visa approved and also issued. So don't make that mistake. Make sure you allow enough time for the visa process in Dubai. If you want to do the visa process yourself, allow at least 2 weeks. If you decide to work with us, we can take care of everything, even including the appointment with the banker to open your bank account within only 1 week. The third and final step in your visa process is applying for and obtaining your Emirates ID. You can apply for your Emirates ID as soon as you have your visa. You basically have two options to do it. You can do it online or you can do it at a so-called typing center, and it usually takes like 1 to 2 weeks until you will get it. But you also have the option to accelerate the process, and then you get the Emirates ID just in a couple of days. So what is the Emirates ID? It is like a national ID card that you will basically need to have for any of the official processes, like setting up a bank account, signing a tenancy contract, getting a driver license, getting a local phone number, and things like this. So when you now have your Emirates ID, you are officially fully a resident in the UAE, which means that you can now live there and stay there for as long as you want, or you can go back to your home countries. So now that you are a resident, let's talk about which area you want to live in. If you don't already know which area you want to live in, I recommend that you just rent a car and drive around the different areas to figure out which areas you actually like most. So the most common areas where most expats are gonna live are Dubai Marina, Dubai Downtown and Business Bay, and then in the very expensive end you obviously have the Palm Jumeirah or the beachfront. So these are some of the more modern areas where most expats are gonna live. Another step you can initiate with your Emirates ID is opening a bank account, and this includes both private accounts and business accounts if you have a company, and this can be a bit of an annoying process. This is probably the most difficult step for many expats in Dubai. Without contacts in the banks, opening a business account in particular can sometimes take a very long time, and often applicants are even rejected directly at the bank. So this means contacts are especially valuable in top tier banks such as FAB, Emirates NBD and ADCB. Also keep in mind that you will need a local phone number in order to fill out some of the bank applications, and if you don't already have one, you can also use like a temporary tourist number and then just change it afterwards to a new number. Also with your bank account, if you are self-employed, if you have your own company, you will pretty much be able to get any credit card as soon as you want. For some very strong cards like the Emirates Skywards Infinite card, you will need to prove a certain minimum income. I think it's currently like 30,000 AED if I'm not mistaken, and this is like $8,000 US. But in general, you simply make a deposit with the credit card provider, and then you will receive this deposit as a credit line, and that deposit will also be earning interest. So it's not like you use it, it's just locked into the bank as long as you have that credit card. If you have a salary, you probably don't need to do that. You can just get it based on your salary certificate or something like that. So if you want to really live in Dubai, essentially permanently move here, you will also need accommodation. So there are two major platforms where you can find properties to buy and rent, and these are Bayut and Property Finder. If you want to rent, you often pay the rent in advance, sometimes for the whole year in advance, sometimes quarterly or even monthly. Basically, it's up to you how you arrange it with the agent or the landlord. And on top of that, you pay a 5 to 10% deposit depending on whether the apartment or house is furnished or unfurnished, and typically 5% commission to the agent. So that is pretty much everything you will need to know to come here and set up everything. Now some last details about more advanced topics you need to be aware of as a business owner in Dubai. The first point is something that most people don't have on their radar. So if you have a UAE company and you are billing your clients or customers via payment processors like Stripe, for example, it can sometimes happen that the card payments are declined just because you are billing via a UAE company. So why? Essentially, credit card providers might sometimes think that you are a fraudulent company or something like that, and what I can recommend to you and what we can also do for you is to set up a US LLC, for example. You can then use the US LLC as the actual billing company, and the US LLC can then be held by your UAE company, for example, and the US LLC ultimately forwards the payments. This is not a requirement, so to set up a US LLC, but it can really simplify the setup if you work with payment processors. And then you will need to be aware of any annual filing requirements that you have here. There is a 9% corporate tax in the UAE. Now the way the 9% corporate tax work is that if you make in total less than 3 million dirham revenue, so not profit in a year, that's around $800,000 US, you can apply for what's called a small business exemption, which means that you are still gonna be completely exempt from tax. But if you make in total more than 3 million dirham in revenue, then you are gonna be subject to this 9% corporate tax. But even then, your first 375,000 dirhams are going to be exempt, so essentially it's gonna be 0% tax, and everything above that is gonna be taxed at 9%. The good thing is that your salary, for example, also reduces your profit, and your salary in turn is tax-free, so you don't pay personal income tax in the UAE. As a managing director of your own company, you can also pay yourself a reasonably high salary, so effectively the tax rate is then even lower than 9%. As soon as you have established your company, you will have to register for corporate tax, and then 9 months after every financial year, you will have to essentially file your corporate tax return. And the other thing you want to be aware of, apart from corporate tax, is VAT registration. Now, if you sell outside the UAE, you won't have to charge value-added tax, which is 5% in the UAE. It's only applicable on any sales within the UAE. But even if you sell outside the UAE, you will still have to register for value-added tax, and you will have to do that as soon as you hit a threshold of 375,000 dirham in taxable supplies. And then for everything else, your business license will have to be renewed every year. The same applies to the establishment card, and depending on where you established your company, for example in a free zone or on the mainland, the process is also slightly different. And then every 2 years, in case you don't have a golden visa, which is valid for 10 years, you will have to renew your personal visa, essentially your employment visa in your own company or your partner visa. So that is basically a summary of everything in terms of how you can move here. What you can do is come back to this video like as you go through the process, because I know that this can sound very complicated, but as long as you just make sure you go through all of these steps correctly, then everything will be very smooth, and it's a very quick process at the end of the day. As mentioned before, if you want help, we support you throughout the entire process, from correctly emigrating from your home country to setting up your business in Dubai, obtaining a visa and opening a bank account, to finding your dream property and other matters in the future. We would be very happy to assist you, and perhaps we will see you in Dubai very soon.